You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies. Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan Lang, and with me, as always, is Skyler Timmons. Skyler, we finally got some snow.
Yes. It's mostly all melted here where I am, but there was snow for even a little bit.
We got a good 6-7 inches. 6-7? Is that, I don't...
I'm quitting this podcast.
I'm quitting this podcast. I think that is the sign that it's time for this episode to be over already. So, Skyler, where can the folks find you at?
You can find me playing Metroid Prime 4, no longer allegedly, Evan. It's real. It exists. I've played it.
What are your thoughts?
I've only played a little tiny bit, but it looks gorgeous.
I would hope so after, 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a hot minute. And yet, they still will not re-release Metroid Primes 2 and 3 on the Switch.
Eventually, maybe.
They should have done it before this game came out, because as far as I'm aware, I think Primes 4's story is a continuation of Prime 3.
Not really.
Look, I don't want to have to dig out a Wii U to play Metroid Prime 2 and 3.
But you can.
But I don't want to.
But you can.
Like, not only is the Wii U not a particularly good console to play, I don't want to have to rearrange the wires and make sure everything works and make sure the stupid gamepad works, because if the gamepad doesn't work, the entire thing is dead in the water. The Wii U was not a very well-designed system. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that was fine.
I don't. But we got a lot to talk about today. We will start with our quick Colorado sports roundup. As always, at the time of recording, the Denver Broncos at 10-2 have literally just started playing against the Las Vegas Raiders. That game should be an easy win. If it's not, there's far more concerns. The Denver Nuggets struggling a little bit. They've lost 4 straight at home. They barely beat the Atlanta Hawks in a comeback victory. The defense just is not defensing, though the bench really stepped up against the Atlanta Hawks. But like we said last week, they are really missing Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown.
Then they're just getting away from Nuggets basketball, where there was one game I was watching, they just needed they were down by 3, and then they just kept trying to shoot 3-pointers and just kept missing. And then, they'd get the rebound and go score a bucket, and then Nuggets are in a deeper hole. Just go get some points and then play defense. And so
that was against the Dallas Mavericks, considered one of the worst offensive teams in the league right now. And the hole just kept getting deeper and deeper because the defense was getting completely shut down. And like you said, they were just trying for all these 3-pointers when at some point you've just got to take the opportunity to put points on the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but hopefully they got to get healthy and they got to figure out their woes at home. They're good on the road. They've been stinky at home, and they need to figure that out.
Yeah, just not ideal.
Because their roommates are very good at home.
Yeah.
They're very good on the road, too.
Are continuing to rock and roll here. Unfortunately, on this road trip, they have their second regulation loss.
Cancel the season. They're losing it all.
It was a pretty rough loss. And there was a dumb goal early in the game that should not have been allowed. It was goaltender interference, but that was not the reason why the Avs lost. And while it was an ugly loss, it's hard to be mad because we knew another loss had to happen eventually. It is not sustainable to have only one loss in regulation this deep into the season already.
Yeah, and it's not like they haven't lost games. Like, of course, there's the shootouts and there's the overtime stuff, but the fact that there's only 2 games now in which they haven't walked away with a point, it says a lot of just how good this team is. Nathan McKinnon's still a wizard on the ice. Good stuff across the board. Just everybody. Their power play is still stinky, but everybody else is
the
just
the power play is truly awful, and that's gonna end up being a big problem. And I think a lot of eyes are on special teams coach Dave Hackstall right now, because we were calling for Ray Bennett's head for years over the power play, and it is significantly worse now that he is gone, and that's something that's going to need to get fixed.
So
then
the key tactic for other teams is just to always be getting penalties, always make the Avs put the Avs on the power play.
It kind of feels that way because they're legitimately bad, like legitimately one of, if not the worst power play in the league, the worst road power play in the league by a lot. And it was a big deal, though, because the Avs managed to, after that loss against New Jersey, rattle off back-to-back wins against the but no, do I have it backwards?
It was against the Islanders.
We lost to the Islanders, and then we beat New Jersey, and we beat the Rangers, and then we beat the Flyers today. I don't know why I'm saying New Jersey.
I don't know.
But either way, back-to-back wins for the Avs this weekend. Even though they looked absolutely gassed at the end of the Flyers game, playing their third game in 4 days. But the Avs keep finding ways to win, and that's really all that matters right now.
Yeah. Keep on rolling.
Meanwhile, we hope the Broncos can do the same. They are now in the red zone on their first drive of the game. Let's start the game with a touchdown, I think would be really nice. But that'll do it for our Colorado sports talk. And we've got a lot of Colorado Rockies news to talk about as we head into the winter meetings. It has once again been a very busy week because, of course, after we already uploaded the episode, after both Skyler and I wrote our articles for the week, some very big news dropped. And that is that the Rockies have finally hired their general manager under President of Baseball Operations, Paul DePodesta. And that general manager is someone poached from the Los Angeles Dodgers organization. It is their former, senior vice president and assistant general manager, Josh Byrnes.
Yes. I like the way Schnurub thinks.
He comes from someplace far away. But somehow not. This is, I think, something to start off with this hire that makes it really interesting is it's kind of that best of both worlds situation. Remember how early in the PBO search I was talking about how Dick Monfort was really not comfortable with guys that had no history outside of the organization. And we do have a guy who, for a couple years, not a ton, but a few years, was involved with the Colorado Rockies organization. And outside of that, he has extensive experience in the National League West, not just having spent the last, 14 years with the... No, I'm mixing that up with the other person because there was another hire earlier this week as well. He has been with the Dodgers for 11 years, going back into 2014. But he also served as a general manager for the Arizona Diamondbacks and a general manager for the San Diego Padres. Skyler, what do you think of this hire overall?
Sorry, I'm chomping on a lifesaver. I think it's a good move overall. It's a clear indication. Like you said, it's kind of the best of both worlds for Dick Monfort of, okay, this guy has connections back to the Rockies, but he has that experience in the National League West in general. He worked with Paul DePodesta in Cleveland for a little bit, and they even go back even longer before that. They played ball against each other in high school back in the D.C. area, so they've known each other for a long time and everything. So he's got that connection, and so you hope that meshes well. But the biggest thing is he comes from winning cultures, with the Dodgers, helping them win 3 World Series. And I think the biggest thing we've seen thus far is his stuff really focused on player acquisition and kind of drafting development and heading up drafting, scouting, all that aspect, the stuff that the Rockies are really needing to focus on and rebuild and improve upon. So you bring a guy who's coming from an organization that probably does it better than anybody else, and now he's going to bring that back over to the Rockies and hopefully start building the winner, changing the culture, and bringing a new standard to the Rockies that they haven't had.
Yeah, and it's been, he's found success with every team he's been with. Of course, with the Dodgers over the last 11 years, Dodgers have consistently been the guys who basically run the National League West. 2 World Series acquisitions of major players. In addition to that great player development, because it's not just the big name acquisitions, as much as we hate the Dodgers for them, they also draft and develop very, very well. But he also did the same with both the Diamondbacks and the Padres, in terms of those were some pretty solid teams while he was there, and the player acquisition and drafting and development was really solid as well. I mean, some of the players that he was responsible for drafting, you have guys like Trey Turner, Paul Goldschmidt, AJ Pollock, Max Scherzer. This is a guy where the players he has drafted have turned out to be big leaguers and regular big league contributors. And yeah, there's a couple busts on there, as there's gonna be for the most part. Not every draft pick is a winner, especially since the majority of those draft picks for his tenure as a front office executive is when there were 40 rounds.
Yeah.
And that's just, when you have 40 rounds of players, they're not all going to be winners.
Yeah.
But it's so important for a team like the Rockies, who have largely failed to develop any of their draft picks over the last decade plus, to have a guy who is intimately knowledgeable about that process and, wants to put in the resources into drafting and player development.
Yeah, and he brings the interesting thread we've seen here, Evan, now with DePodesta and now Byrnes, is both those guys worked under Dan O'Dowd. Worked with him back over in Cleveland back in the late 90s, and it was Dan O'Dowd that recommended pretty much connect the Rockies with DePodesta, and I'm sure there's some influence there too of Byrnes coming over. But you have that, and that was Dan O'Dowd's, I think his big prerogative too was, we got to be a draft and develop. We got to be good with our homegrown players. And I think the Rockies took that, but then they didn't know how to utilize it properly, especially ever since Dick Monfort really took over, the head role in that controlling role back in 2011. Since the Rockies haven't really known what to do with all that stuff or keep things sustained, a nice pipeline. Whereas the Dodgers, it's just a well-oiled machine year after year. They're going to go out and spend and get the best players available. But if there's a perfect option in-house, I think they're going to turn to that because they have the resources to make them better. And I think they mentioned it in their interviews too and whatnot, but I think that's the big thing. We've talked about it a lot before too, Evan, of what the Rockies have failed, of why it's hard for them to bring in free agents, especially pitching, is because they didn't have the plan in place to say, hey, come over to us. This is how we're going to make you better, to pitch at Coors Field. Because that's what the Dodgers always did. This is how we're going to make you better. This is the information we have for you to make you a better player. And the Rockies haven't had that. But that's something like DePodesta and Byrnes are bringing to the table now. I think he kind of talked about that. Of having guys come over and we can have the tools and resources to make players better, whether it's we've drafted and developed them, we've traded for this young guy, or we've signed somebody. It's all about making players better when they're with your team. And I think Byrnes has that foundation and that experience to help bring that to the Rockies that they've been lacking.
And I think something that puts it into stark contrast, you mentioned since Dick Monfort took over, a very, very good article over on Yahoo Sports last week, written by Jake Mintz of Yahoo Sports, about the Rockies and their not really even reluctance, their complete stonewalling of evolution, of growing as an organization, of utilizing tools for player development. There's a mention in the article of having to trick a staff member into giving them a true media password so that they could look at some of their pitching analytics. Just really, really pushing back very hard on technological development, player development, the tools that everyone else is using. And the article mentions, there's a handful of progressive types within the organization who have been pushing against that, and that's how we ended up getting the pitching development lab in Arizona. Guys like Scott Oberg have really been pushing for that modernization, and coordinator of performance science Emilio Martinez. But there's never really been a buy-in to it because it's been Dick Monfort calling the shots. And, as much as everyone thinks that Dick Monfort is a nice guy, they also, showed that there's not really a true incentive to win when you're pushing back against all of that. And I think where we're at now is just showing that I really feel like all of these hires show that Dick Monfort isn't really calling the shots right now. We were really worried about that when the PBO search got really messy, when Emil Sade and Matt Foreman both dropped out. And we were worried about Paul DePodesta at first, but all of the moves that they keep making, and some of the moves that we'll talk about later in the show, are not things that you would normally associate with Rockies baseball. And it's a pretty good feeling.
Yeah, it's just that feeling of new. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are some things and some moves that they've done as well that still making like, I don't know about this. And a lot of any like additions they've made are kind of still Rockies moves of, here's this random veteran on a minor league contract that we'll have come in. Like, okay, it's all just business as usual. And so we're still waiting to see a lot of the big impact of these moves of these guys coming in. But it's kind of that notion that, okay, they are ready to start trying new things and giving DePodesta and Byrnes the leeway to run the team, do the day-to-day operation stuff and helping with that developmental part of things, and give them the resources to invest in in the research stuff and allocate money into technologies that will help the team get better. And another one that we can add into it, Nikki Schmidt, who's added in as the chief financial revenue person thingy.
Chief Revenue and Strategy Officer is her official job title.
It was that new position that Walker said he was going to make, but from what it sounds like, they just took what Greg Fiesel did and split it into two jobs. And and Walker kind of is overseeing it all, but then she'll handle like ticket revenues, all that stuff, and allocate funds and whatnot, and allocate resources.
More bobblehead games, please, Nikki.
Yes.
But what's also interesting about Nikki Schmidt is, again, going back to the well of Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Nikki Schmidt spent 14 years with the Cleveland team, was heavily involved in their rebrand into becoming the Guardians a few years ago, and also is listed as sort of a key player in getting the team to adopt more analytics in terms of both the on-field and off-field product. And I think it's really interesting that the Rockies keep going back to this Cleveland well. I think what's most interesting for me about Nikki Schmidt is the rebrand idea, because there is kind of murmurings among Rockies fandom that sometimes the brand is a little stale. There's not been a ton of changes with the Rockies over the last decade plus. We get a new uniform on occasion, mostly through the City Connect things, but the ballpark experience, fairly stale. Not a ton of stuff that really jumps out at you. The promotions, not really a ton of that. So I'm really interested to see where things go under her. But with all these Cleveland connections and all these connections of guys who have known Paul DePodesta, I do kind of wonder if there still might be a role for Thad Levine at some point.
I don't know. All the kind of big roles are taken, so unless he wants to come in as an assistant GM or something. But yeah, and that's the thing is like, who knows how much more change is going to be made, because Byrnes and DePodesta, we might start going into things like, actually, we need some new lifeblood in here because, Danny Montgomery or some of these guys have been here since 92, 93. And, I think it'll be slow trickle, but having these two at the top, I think is going to be helpful in just starting to change the culture. And from the get go, like, yeah, there's no sugarcoating it. 119 losses was bad. And so we need to get more talent, better talent, and talent that fits better with this team and what we're looking for and want to do and development and all that stuff. So, we're going to start seeing more, I think, things trickle down from top to bottom and getting more unified organization that utilizes tools at their disposal and help guys just get better. Because like you had mentioned, why were the Rockies actively working against technology of, hey, pitchers, you can't pitch in front of TrackMan? You're like, why? No, we're not going to give you analytics or that data. We're going to have it. And then what are they using it for? And so it's one thing for them to kind of be ignorant and like, we don't really have the money. We don't want to pay for it. We're just going to keep doing our thing. To then like, no, technology bad. And it's going to steal my identity type of thing. It was full on boomer for Dick Monfort and the organization when it came to technology, Evan.
Yeah. And it's not the first time we've really heard about that, where, in an article that I wrote for Purple Row earlier this year, sort of around the end of the season, about how the Rockies need to start rebuilding their reputation because their reputation is really bad throughout the league. And one of the things that came up during that was the fact that they wouldn't let, for the longest time, their minor leaguers see their metrics, see their analytics, have access to these tools. And those tools that we know of are so important when it comes to player development, when it comes to anything really, when it comes to strategizing for games. Just the absolute, I don't know if it's delusion or what, that, maybe we don't even need these tools, but clearly you do.
Yeah. And a lot of it was just the stagnation of, well, we're still getting a bunch of people at the ballpark. We're still making money. So, whatever with the team. We'll do what we can, but we're not going to, it's stuff we've talked about time and time again. And, Dick Monfort can say only once, I care about winning and all this stuff. But then we get articles like that Yahoo one where it's like, no, he doesn't. It's the bottom line, getting the money. And there's little incentive to try and improve more and everything. And I think that's what's nice with Walker coming in. Our pals over at DMVR Rockies talked to Walker, and he's like, hey, we've lost sight of innovation. And it became stagnant with this organization. And now that Dick's kind of stepped back, Walker's filling that role. He's like, we're going to do things. And I think Byrnes and DePodesta, it's a good start for them.
Yeah. And honestly, I am really curious to see where things go, because you talked about the uncertainty earlier, but honestly, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because the difference is, we were certain the Rockies were going to be bad, certain they weren't going to change things, certain that they weren't going to do what was right. And we've talked about it on this show before, that the Rockies viewed everything as, we're a stable organization, but stability without any progress or without any desire for progress, like you've said, is stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea, at the very least, that we're finally pulling ourselves out of stagnation, out of the muck, and trying to do new things. And I give a major shout out to Josh Byrnes for coming over here from 11 seasons with a organization that's one of the best in baseball, that's constantly winning, to an organization that is, for lack of a better term, an absolute train wreck, and being willing to take on the challenge of, hey, maybe we can fix this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see what happens.
Yeah. And it's nice is that this seems like a team, like two guys that are unified in the vision of what they kind of their strengths and things they understand are as important for a baseball team. And so you get two of those guys, and hopefully they can get full reign and make an impact. And we've already seen, they're being a little more shrewd in the roster that we'll talk about in our next segment. And like you said, that uncertainty kind of is refreshing where, yeah, there's still things they've done and things they may do that we won't like, that we'll think is stupid, but that's par for the course with the Rockies. But it's the fact that we can expect things to happen this offseason. Like, look, we're probably never going to get to our award show because there's been so much to talk about this offseason because the Rockies have started doing things. And it's not like, well, we heard a rumor they're going to sign Tyro Estrada. They've signed Tyro Estrada. Oh, here's a random 40-year-old, some random minor league contract to a veteran. But there's actually impactful things happening this offseason that hopefully can pay dividends in 2026 until we don't get to see anything until 2028 because 27 is going to be a loss.
Yeah. But it's going to be really interesting, that's for sure. And they've already started doing things, and I think that's what we are going to discuss after we take a quick break. We've already ran long on this segment, which, like Skyler said, shows it's actually really fascinating to have this much to talk about in the off season.
We have more to talk about this off season than we did in the regular season.
It kind of feels that way, yeah. But don't go anywhere. We'll keep this discussion rolling right after this. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Skyler, and we're just going to keep the train rolling here. So now that Josh Byrnes is here, now that Paul DePodesta is here, we're already starting to see some interesting changes being made. And, you know, we've talked about some of the other roster moves they made. They brought in Troy Johnston and a couple other, you know, older guys on minor league signings, some waiver claims.
Smorgasbord of random relievers and starting pitch, mostly relievers.
Nothing really crazy. And for some of the earlier ones, you sort of wonder how much of that were things that were already being planned by the organization before DePodesta really sunk his teeth in. But I think we started to see, like you mentioned earlier, the evaluation and the potential shrewdness coming in, because the Rockies made some roster moves last week, and a few of them were a little bit of a surprise. And we'll start with one that's not that huge a surprise. The Rockies quietly waived former Rule 5 draft acquisition Anthony Molina. He was acquired by the Atlanta Braves, wishing him the best. And Molina was a grab that the old regime under Bill Schmidt, under his scouting staff, were very high on. They made comparisons of him to Herman Marquez, even though I never really thought that comparison was apt.
Oh, it was apt over these last couple of years, Evan.
Oof. But it didn't really work out. He was used as a reliever for most of his rookie season, and then they planned to convert him into being a starter. He really struggled as a starter in AAA Albuquerque, and he never really started on the big league roster this last year and struggled all the same. So, you know, not really a surprise. Rule 5 drafts can be hit or miss like that, but he is gone. You know, wishing him the best of luck with Atlanta and their weird fixation with former Rockies pitchers.
It's weird that it's happened twice this offseason.
And it will probably happen more, honestly. Like, just something about Atlanta. They just like, oh, the Rockies let that guy go. We'll take him.
Mm-hmm.
We'll trade for him. But yeah, wish him Molina the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough because he does have that potential and, you know, had some interesting tools, but we never really got to see it. And like, he had a lot of outings where he just got blown up this year, and never worked more than he went 5 innings once in a start, and he gave up 7 runs on 9 hits. Otherwise, it was 1 to 2 innings most of the time. Had one other 3-inning outing, but just wasn't necessarily that he walked a ton. Problem is he didn't strike out a ton. Like, he would do good in those short bursts, but he just gave up so much dang contact. A lot of contact, honestly, a lot of hard contact.
Yeah, he was honestly like the quintessential, even though he wasn't necessarily fully developed by us, that classic Rockies pitcher development issue of they can't get strikeouts. They do walk too many, even if walks aren't necessarily the main problem, and they're just not lasting deep enough. And, you know, for Anthony Molina, I'm pretty sure he was the recipient of the Bud Black special in terms of big league debut, correct me if I'm wrong here. Bud Black's tendency to throw a Rockies rookie pitcher right into the fire. Bases loaded, go get him, kid.
Yes, on March 28th, 2024, in that 16-1 loss, was that opening day? Molina gave up 6 runs on 6 hits with 1 walk in a third of an inning. He faced 8 batters in the third inning.
It's the Bud Black special, and honestly, we saw bits and pieces from him, but he never really stood up to his ranking as a prospect, where he was unranked in the Rays organization. But because, as we know now, the Rockies prospects pool wasn't particularly deep, he was a top 30 prospect in 2024.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, sometimes things just don't work out, and it's part of the first of you're seeing this new group in Byrnes and DePodesta willing to part ways with the guys that were acquired by the previous front office, or that the previous front office were high on. And I think there's no better example of that than the next guy who shocked us all, is that the Rockies waived Drew Romo, former top catching prospect, and he was claimed by the Baltimore Orioles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one that I'm still kind of upset about. I don't agree with it. And I know people are like, oh, well, we have Hunter Goodman. Yeah, you have Hunter Goodman, and you better hope Hunter Goodman can replicate what he did this year in 26. Like, you want that with any player. But for me, they did not give Drew Romo the fair shake that they should have, because Bud Black hated the way he threw back to the pitcher, and they just let that, I think, overall, even though he is a better catcher defensively than Braxton Fulford and Hunter Goodman, and we've saw what he could do offensively down in AAA and throughout the minors, but they just did not give him the fair shake. Even when he worked on fixing those yips, throwing back to the pitcher this year, he got those figured out, and they just would not give him the opportunity. And that really makes me upset.
And those yips, the issue that he had with throwing, were a known issue before he got to the bigs. And honestly, in my opinion, it's a failure of the organization and a failure of the player development staff that he was allowed to get to AAA, to get to the big league squad, while still having that throwing issue.
Yeah.
The fact that he made it that far with that bad habit is, I think, something to be condemned when it comes to the former front office. And it is very frustrating, because I agree with you. He didn't really get that much of a fair shot. And he had a lot of stuff go against him in the last year and change, where he came up, made his big league debut. He had the weird throwing motion that nobody would stop talking about. And at the big league level, he really struggled at the plate. And eventually he stopped getting those chances, and he was optioned to AAA to start the 2025 season, where in his first spring training game with the minor league squad, he broke a bone in one of his fingers and was out until late May.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is, while he was out, Hunter Goodman took off, and Braxton Fulford looked really good as the starting catcher for the Albuquerque Isotopes. And I think, unfortunately, that was just kind of the nail in the coffin for him, where, he came in late, he had already gotten passed by, and now he's making up ground, because for a hot minute, he was not doing so well in AAA this year earlier, because he's coming in late and having to regain ground. And he never really got a true shot in the bigs again with the Rockies. And that's, I think, what is really frustrating.
Yeah.
Where he didn't get called up until roster expansion in September. And even then, he got 3 plate appearances.
Yeah. And like Warren Schaefer straight up says, we want the other 2 guys in a regular rotation, so there's no room for him to play. Okay, you're going to lose 120 games this year, Warren. Like, you could have put him in there more often. Like, I don't think anybody's going to lose sleep over Braxton Fulford not getting a start during that final stretch of the season. But it just feels like, and we'll talk about another one here. It's weird when you see them give up on young players. Like, I could understand, like, oh yeah, we've tried Romo. He's been a backup catcher. He's been up and down, and we've given him some good opportunities, but nothing's happened. Kind of like with, you think of the Sean Bouchard, and he's off the roster. They DFA'd him during the season and became a free agent. He had opportunities, didn't do anything. They cut him loose. Okay, that's the typical cycle. But for me, like, yeah, we have some bias. Friend of the show, Drew Romo. But it's that fact that he just didn't give them the shot. He's 24. Yeah. You took him as a high school pick. Yeah, there's risk in that, but he regularly showed he was good at catching and could adapt and develop, had a quick rise through the system, and then he just gets to the big one. They're like, never mind. It's just frustrating
for me.
On that.
For me, it's very complicated because on one hand, I am completely with you where he didn't get a fair shot. It's incredibly frustrating, and this is not what I wanted to see happen at all. But on the other hand, I have to look at the shrewdness of Paul DePodesta and Josh Byrnes going, this was a draft pick by, Bill Schmidt and Jeff Bridich in the previous Rockies regime that they were all really high on. This is not one of our guys, and we're going to cut him loose. And I can see some of the reasons why. His bat is still a work in progress. Developing catchers is something the Rockies have historically been quite terrible at. Like, let's be honest. Hunter Goodman, if he can continue what he did last year, is much more of a fluke than something the Rockies have historically been able to do. And let's be clear, I want Hunter Goodman to be good next year.
Yeah.
Like, if he can continue to do what he's done and be, honestly, the Rockies' real, true first franchise long-term catcher since Chris Iannetta that they developed, that's great. But at the same time, cutting bait on Romo so early when you know that not only is he a high school draft pick, which are always a huge risk, but he's a high school catcher that was a glove first catcher whose bat needed a ton of work coming out of high school in the Woodlands, Texas. And to see the Rockies give up on that is frustrating, especially when, like you said, we love Drew Romo and we're a little bit biased because, yes, friend of the show. But at the same time, it just strikes me as it's this weird combination of, it is really weird because he's still very young and you could potentially still develop him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have already said multiple times on this show throughout its history that the Rockies have too bad a habit of hanging on to their guys, hanging on to those former top prospects for too long and not being willing to cut bait for fear of they might go somewhere else and be good.
Yeah. And the main thing I see too is, like, what is it that you can look at their numbers? What is it that Braxton Fulford did to earn the presumable backup spot? Because honestly, Fulford didn't really impress in his big league time this year either. Yeah, he did really good in AAA. Well, so did Romo in 24. Yeah. It's hard to follow the line of logic with this sort of thing, especially when you're talking about a backup catcher. Where, okay, yeah, Romo could easily be the backup catcher and let him develop, get those opportunities that Hunter Goodman got. And look what Goodman was able to take off and do because he got ample opportunities.
Yeah, and I would argue that they didn't even really give Fulford that many opportunities.
Yeah, at some point they didn't.
Down the big league squad. Like, he really wasn't playing all that much. It was maybe once a week, twice a week at best. And Fulford, like, he did show some flashes. He did some pretty cool stuff. Like, we're not trying to dump on Braxton Fulford. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where we could be looking at a completely different situation had any number of minor things gone differently.
Yeah.
Because the Rockies catching situation was bizarre last season, where, remember, they went into 2025 and originally we thought, okay, well, it's probably going to be, Drew Romo or something, or Hunter Goodman. And then they bring back Jacob Stallings to be a veteran backup, which is fine.
We thought he was going to be the starter.
Yeah, but then going into spring training, they were like, our expectation is going to be that Stallings is going to be the starting catcher. Then Hunter Goodman wins the job out of spring training. Eventually, Stallings is released. And then, because Drew Romo was so far behind because of that hand injury, they called up Braxton Fulford.
Yeah.
And, Fulford did some cool stuff. He had a home run. He had some extra base hits, stole the base, but he also struck out a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so did everybody on the Rockies, but and his defense, like, of all of the available catchers that they could have turned to while Romo was out, yes, Braxton Fulford was probably the best defender of them. But historically, Drew Romo has been the guy who is the defense first catcher.
Yeah.
And just the fact that at any point during the season, a losing season where you lost 119 games, they didn't call him up. They didn't really give him another chance. And it was frustrating. It was one of the few things that I really was unhappy with Warren Schaefer about, was when he said, yeah, this is just a learning experience. He's not really going to play that much.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, Schaefer, well, is that your thinking? Or is that someone in the front office's thinking? Like, whose decision was that is something that I've been wanting to know.
Yeah, and whose decision was it to ultimately come? Did they come to Warren like, okay, we're looking at these catchers, and who do you think is going to be on this roster? And did he go, oh, it's going to be Goodman and Fulford? Like, okay. And they cut Romo. That, like, the thinking behind the scenes is frustrating. And no, it is what it is. But
yeah,
hey, like you said, that's a good point to kind of focus on. This is a move previous Rockies wouldn't do. I mean, we're used to that. But hey, this team is going to be shrewd in their decision making, and even a top catching prospect, a first round pick type of thing, he's not even safe. Who knows what else they'll do?
Yeah, and I do like the idea, I have to say, of nobody being safe.
Yeah.
Of a potential of, let's tear this thing down to the studs. We got work to do.
Yeah.
And our one of our colleagues at Purple Row, Renee Deckert, is still pretty adamant that Brenton Doyle is maybe going to get traded this offseason. We don't know. It's one of those things where this is an offseason where going into 2026, you can feel like nobody's really safe except for Hunter Goodman, because we know that after an all-star campaign, unless you get a really good trade offer for him, he's going to be the opening day starting catcher. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty apparent at this point. And Ezekiel Tovar, I guess. But even then, we don't know, because he didn't have that good of a season.
No, and he has a lot of problems still that he still hasn't gotten out of.
Yeah. So it's a curious situation. And all we can do is wait and see. And we're going to take one more quick ad break here, and there's even more stuff on this to talk about. Mm-hmm. So, don't go anywhere. We'll keep rolling on this after this short break.
Good luck, Romo.
Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Skyler, our third and final segment here. Wrap things up from our last segment. Just wanting to wish, once again, friend of the show, Drew Romo, all of the best. I think it's also a tough situation he's heading into in Baltimore. They have multiple other catching prospects there, in addition to wondering if Adley Rutschman can turn things around. And I really hope that Romo can, if he doesn't end up sticking with the Orioles, that he finds a place where he can be a big league catcher, because I do strongly believe that he is capable of doing so.
Yeah, he can be, even at the very, a backup catcher. Like, I think he can easily be that and play into something more. He just needs the chance, just like any player. No, Braxton Fulford needed a chance. Hunter Goodman needed a chance. Every ball player, needs a chance to really develop and stick at the big league level. And hopefully he gets that, whether with the Orioles or somewhere else.
Yeah. And speaking of guys who need a chance, another guy who is now off of the Rockies roster and no longer with the team was a guy who they surprised us all by giving a chance. And that is corner infielder Warming Bernabel, who came up and started blistering hot when he made his big league debut, was one of the few bright spots of a hideous 2025 season. And it was announced just yesterday at time of recording that he had been quietly waived, made it through waivers, and declined to be outrighted to AAA Albuquerque, and is now a free agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially it comes after Michael Toglia got non-tendered, I'm like, okay, well, what are they going to do at first base? I guess Blaine Crim's in the mix. Warming Bernabel will be on the mix. Troy Johnston probably will be in the mix for that. And I guess while Molina and Romo got claimed, Bernie didn't get claimed and chooses to elect free agency instead of being outrighted. Because if folks will remember, this was the second time he had been outrighted off the 40-man roster, so he could decline the assignment to AAA. So that's, if people are wondering how he became a free agent, that's why, because he had already been outrighted once. But he started off hot, Evan. That was the thing. Known for contact, a high contact bat, but not a lot of power, and had that blistering player of the week start to his career, but then cooled off very quickly down the rest of the stretch of the season, lost some time to an injury, but ultimately, I think we all knew he wasn't the long-term answer at first base.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones because we loved what we got out of Warming Bernabel over his first month in the big leagues, where in his first 23 games or so, he only struck out 11 times, drew 4 walks, and had an OPS of 891.
Yeah.
Hit 6 doubles, a triple, 4 home runs, 13 ribbies, and all of a sudden it was like, where did this guy come from? Because this was a guy that, like you said, the Rockies had outrighted him off of the 40-man roster previously. And he had his struggles in the minors, multiple injuries. He was shot. Like he's been through it, but you saw him have that really good start. And then he started to cool off. Then he had some other injuries. He had the concussion that kept him out for a while as well. And ultimately, even though he is still very young at 23 years old, it was tough to say, especially my understanding is that analytics wise, StatCast wise, people weren't particularly high on him, which does explain why he cleared waivers despite being only 23 years old. And now he is off the roster entirely. And it's sad because, like I said, Warming was one of those very bright spots in a miserable season. Like, we all had a lot of fun watching Warming Bernabel. Play first base, a position he hadn't played a ton of. He had that moment with Juan Mejia that was one of the viral moments of the season. He was a lot of fun, but at the same time, like we said earlier, this is one of those things where it is a shrewd decision by the new front office to let go of a player who's only 23 years old and leave a bunch of question marks open at first base.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to see if this means we're going to bring somebody in, which is entirely possible, or if this means, well, for this year, until Charlie Condon is ready, we're just going to stick it out with Blaine Crim or Troy Johnston.
Yeah. Or a platoon of those two, which, in a world with where the team is right now, it's not a bad world to live in. Yeah, they're on the older end, in their late 20s. But still, like, we saw Blaine Crim have some good moments and saw some power in his bat and whatnot. And Troy Johnston has been in very good minor league hitter with a brief stint in the big leagues. But yeah, Bernie is kind of that camp where he's a bench player at best a lot of the time because wasn't particularly considered a good fielder, especially at first base, and just a high contact bat with not a lot of impact. So doesn't hit the ball hard. And if he could pull more, maybe that'd help him out, tap into more power. But only just not enough impact with the bat. Yeah, he didn't strike out a ton, could make contact. But even then, when you make contact, it needs to be good contact. And oftentimes, he didn't make good contact. No, it's kind of like the elite contact hitters. You think Luis Arraez. Why is he so good with that contact? Because he finds the sweet spot of the bat. He makes good, solid contact on his swings, and it results in hits and impacting the ball. Bernie, not so much. And so it makes sense why you cut him loose, because, he just didn't fit into the plans. He's not an impact player. He was just kind of a placeholder because they had nobody else to play there through the end of the season. And
when they had given up on Michael Toglia.
Yeah.
It was, well, who else is going to play first base? And ultimately, I think they had the decision between warming Bernabel and Blaine Krim. And honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about that. Uh, I had my own reservations because I'm thinking about, we just cut a guy who's 23 for potentially a platoon of two dudes near 30 years old that are mostly just career minor leaguers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have no idea what else is going to happen. And in a rebuilding year, is it really that bad a thing?
Yeah.
Because right now we know for sure the guy who they are considering the first baseman of the future is Charlie Condon. And we also know that Charlie Condon's probably not ready yet. He had some flashes at Double-A and had some flashes in the Arizona Fall League, but the power still not quite there in terms of consistency. However, his swings are there. Like, he's making consistent contact, but he's just not getting the ball out of the park like he's expected to. And he also only recently converted to being a full-on first baseman. So it's just one of those things where ultimately, I think whoever started at first base in 2026 was going to be a placeholder.
Yeah. And
because unless Condon kills it in spring training and they go, you know what, you're ready.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to happen, especially with the complete reevaluation of the farm system that I am sure is taking place right now with the new front office. I think, like I said, whoever started opening day at first base was going to be a placeholder.
Yeah. And the thing too is, even if you have a placeholder, you still want them to be an impact player, even however little they are. And this is not who Bernabel was. No, if he would just, no, they could have kept him and kept him on the bench, as a bench option. Okay, that's great. But given the choice, yeah, I'd rather take Blaine Krim at first base because he just fits the mold of a impact power first baseman that any team could use. And yeah, you could have easily gone with Bernabel, but a new regime, and we're going to see what they value more. And like you said, I'm sure they looked at the analytics of Bernabel and they're like, this really isn't what we're looking for. This doesn't fit the mold of what we think this team needs or the type of players we think are going to be successful. And they're probably right because, yeah, Bernie came out of the gate hot. He hit under 200 the rest of the way after that first week. And so he came out hot, great, and then it just cratered after that. And you're like, do I really want that more into the next season?
And analytically, Blaine Krim, like looking at their StatCast pages, Krim was better, significantly better over a much shorter period of time, where Krim's OPS plus is a full 10 points higher than Bernabel's in 65 at bats versus 139 at bats. Krim ranks highly in expected slugging, average exit velocity, barrel percentage, hard hit percentage, sweet spot percentage, and bat speed. And Bernabel is pretty low on all of those and is just an okay fielder. And while Krim is also an okay fielder at best, he is an actual first baseman, unlike Bernabel. And he fits that mold, like you said, a lot better. And it's tough because I loved Bernie, ton of fun. But at the end of the day, like you said, with the concussion, with the other injuries, with his lack of performance, I think we did just kind of see towards the end of the season that maybe he's not the guy. And especially while he was out with the concussion, Blaine Krim stepped up.
Yeah, the Krim Reaper. Doing damage.
Yeah. It's tough. We hate seeing especially young guys get their opportunities cut short. I think pretty much everybody feels that same way. But at the end of the day, I think this is probably, and knock on wood that this statement doesn't come back to bite me, is that this is probably the right move.
And ultimately it could be the right move with Drew Romo and Anthony Molina as well. It's not so much the moves that happened, it's what do they do next with that open roster space? What do they do now after they've made these moves? They've been true. Okay, now what do you do to replace this type of talent? That's what makes these things easier to solve and look back on. Like, yeah, you can be upset about him, and that's perfectly fine. I'm still going to be pretty upset about Drew Romo for a while, even if everything turns out fine on the Rockies end. But that's kind of where we're at. And like we had said at the beginning, that's that uncertainty. Now they've done these things. Now, what do they do next? That's what's most important. What do they do next with the opportunities they have now of open roster space? Do they get somebody in the Rule 5 draft? Do they do this? Do they do that? That's the interesting thing.
They are, in my opinion, definitely taking someone in the Rule 5 draft. You do not clear 3 spots on the 40-man roster days before the winter meetings if you are not planning on making some claims in the Rule 5 draft, major league portion, and if you are not planning on making other moves. And I'm really curious now to see what they do during the winter meetings that are starting this week. The Rule 5 draft is on Wednesday. I think they absolutely are going to grab some pitchers.
Yeah, probably. You got 3 spaces open. Probably get 1, maybe 2. Probably 1 for sure. They have the top pick, so.
Yeah. It's the one thing is that the Rockies get the first overall pick in the Rule 5 draft. So they have basically their pick of the litter, and I can all but guarantee you they're going to grab somebody. And like I said, my guess is it's going to be a pitcher. And my guess is it's going to be a starting pitcher. I have no idea who. I have some ideas, but nothing really set in stone over who it might be. But I think the Rockies are going to have a fairly eventful next couple of days.
Winter meetings coming up, and who knows how many more moves and deals get made of what they do. I think Byrnes is trying to catch up on the roster, and I know DePodesta is probably still trying to do that as well. But that was, I think, Byrnes' big thing is he was trying to figure out the state of the roster and who's who and what's it look like. It's nice that he's familiar with just being with the Dodgers, so that maybe helps with the learning curve of knowing who's on the Rockies and whatnot, but we'll see.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I really like about the Josh Byrnes hire is that this guy knows about the Rockies. He's got to play them 13 times a season. 13
He's able to sit there and laugh at them at the bottom of the standings.
Yeah. And honestly, if anybody knows this guy's a big leaguer, this guy isn't, it's a former Dodgers front office executive, which sounds really mean, but I just think about another bit from that article that we talked about that was on Yahoo Sports, was talking about all the other front offices being like, man, the Rockies are so weird. And I think that's going to be a really helpful tool in his belt.
Yeah. And also kind of tie this all in back with like, these roster moves that have happened already. These 3 players, it's not letting sentimentality, and quote unquote loyalty get in the way of trying to build a winning team, and that's what they emphasize. Yeah, homegrown can be great, but really, any sort of player can be homegrown if you develop them correctly when they come over to you, and that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Like, maybe a previous regime would have held on to Bernabel because he's the one that we signed. When we brought him over and he came up with us. Look what Mickey Moniak did. He wasn't part of your team. You didn't draft him and bring him up. Like, he came over and just had a good season. Same with Tyler Freeman.
Yeah.
Like, the talent comes from everywhere. It's nice if it comes up homegrown, and I'm sure they'll look to that. They both respect and understand the importance of the draft, but it's not the end all be all. You just have to turn over every stone to find talent to build your roster out.
Yeah. And I want to roll back to a comment that was posted on Purple Row when we broke the news about warming Bernabel from one of our users over there. And this is something that's kind of been sticking with me. And what this user says, goes by the name of Boston Transplant, says, what I like about these moves is that they're forcing both fans and the organization alike to reset their idea of what a good player looks like. Because we've had so few come through the organization, depressing but true, I think many of us have forgotten, and so did the organization. Bernabel had youth, and I think that can get you ranked on prospect lists, but he was potentially never actually that good.
Yeah.
And I can't think of, and he ends it with, I can't think of any other organization that maybe would have kept him around as long as the Rockies did to begin with.
And that's something we've talked about too. And we you'd see people in the comments that they'd get into that where old equals bad, young equals good. Where no, age doesn't dictate how good or bad you are. It's just the talent of the player, and like potential type thing. Where so it's a good thing for all of us to reconcile with and reset here. I know we are.
Yeah, because what it makes me think of is when we're watching all of these games, while the Rockies are absolutely terrible, and you've got, Huey and Goodman and everybody in the booth trying to hype up these guys and going, oh, he could be an all-star, he could be this, he's one of the greats. But when you really think about it, how many members of the 2025 Colorado Rockies would be everyday starters on a competitive team, on the Dodgers, on the Yankees, on the Red Sox? And the answer to that is probably not that
Maybe
many.
Jimmy Herget in somebody's bullpen.
Hunter Goodman could have been somebody's starting catcher. He did win the Silver Slugger, which is awesome. But I think you could even argue that guys like Ezekiel Tovar probably wouldn't, with how he performed last year, probably wouldn't have been a starting shortstop.
It's true.
That just brings me fond memories of our now departed Herman Marquez and that one game where he pitched like 6 incredible innings while having just the worst diarrhea.
Our sharding pitcher.
On the mound, sharding pitcher. But even like, how many teams would have stuck by Brenton Doyle in that first half of the season when he was struggling so hard?
Or even in that first season, his rookie season, how bad he was on offense.
Yeah. Or heck, look at Ryan McMahon. You know who was not the everyday third baseman on the New York Yankees after he got traded there? Trimac. Yeah, he got some decent playing time, but they were clearly seeing him as a platoon guy, as a guy to be rotated out with other players. And I think that does go to show you is, of course, Rockies fans, we love our guys. And, there's the old adage of never underestimate the love of a baseball fan and that one kind of mediocre player that nobody else remembers on their team. Like, God help me, I'm still the president of the Garrett Hampson fan club. But you just look at, like, we have lost track of who is a good player, who is a starting caliber MLB player, especially when I think the evidence goes to show for itself when it took us how many weeks in ranking the Rockies to get to players with 0 wins above replacement?
Into neutral or positive. Yeah. And so it is. This new regime that's part of it, is they're changing the perception of the league's view of the Rockies. And like the commenter said, that's the fans' perception of player development and how things should work and what a good player looks like and how to evaluate putting together a roster. And people like me who even dive into playing out of the park baseball or MLB The Show and fantasy baseball and diving into that roster stuff. Even I, there's so much more that should go into it to know what a good player is and what makes a good roster.
Yeah, baseball is complicated. I mean, look at Mickey Moniak and Tyler Freeman, who we should, in an ideal world, be talking about what great seasons they had at the plate as 2 of the Rockies' best hitters. And what overshadows it is they both ended up with horrendous overall player value via wins above replacement because they were basically unplayable on defense. And neither of those guys would have been an everyday starter defensively on any other team that stood a chance of being a team in contention.
Maybe a maybe a team that has a smaller outfield for making money for either of them to play.
That is true. I'll give you that. In that, in a less cavernous outfield, Mickey probably
Yeah.
would have done fine. But overall, as an old sage who won the 1985 World Series once said, "Whatever happens, that's baseball, baby."
Yeah. What was Mickey doing in 2023 that he had 2.2 WAR?
I mean, he was playing in a much smaller outfield.
Probably what hell. That's probably what did it for him.
Let's take a look here. I also would like to see how he split his time.
Let's see, 2024. This is exciting podcasting here. End of our episode now. Quietly
we're
Googling.
He made 101 appearances with 91 starts in center field for the Angels. Sorry, 2024 is the year we're looking at, right? 800 innings in center field, total of 932 in the outfield. So I was wondering if he did more DH, but no, he barely played DH.
98 games in center field.
Defensive runs saved, -5. His range factor was fine. Let's look at what Fangraphs has to say. Fangraphs tends to have a little bit better breakdown on defensive metrics.
Yeah, as we're winding down here, Evan, and you're looking that up, close out this episode. What will the Rockies do? Anything big? Any big like trades or notable moves during winter meetings this coming week? Outside of the Rule 5 draft, just at the meetings, will DePodesta and Byrnes craft something together and make a big splash of some kind for the roster?
I'm gonna say outside of the Rule 5 draft, I do think we see maybe one trade. Because I think this winter meetings is a really good opportunity for this new front office to put themselves out there and go, we're not the weirdos we used to be. You can trade with us.
Our mittens aren't sewed into our jackets.
Yeah, like I got to find the quote from that article. Every trade deadline is mind-boggling to the point it's expected we won't get a reasonable or usable response, said a member of another club's front office. We understand that if there's a targetable player in Colorado, we're probably not going to acquire him because the Rockies' logic is singular. So I think this winter meetings is a great opportunity for Paul DePodesta and Josh Byrnes to go out there and say, look, we're not weirdos anymore. We fit in with regular society. Let's trade. Another thing that I think is going to happen is that we're going to start seeing coaching selections.
Yeah, they've been interviewing.
Other teams are already starting to announce their coaching staff for the 2026 season. And I think we're going to finally start getting some of those decisions on the Rockies staff now that Warren Schaefer.
How many of those previous folks, because before they hired DePodesta, they had told all those coaches, oh, you're welcome to stay. We just don't know what role we can give you. If anybody, I think like Jordan Pacheco would stick around, go back to Albuquerque if he wanted.
I think Nick Wilson is also still going to be here.
Yeah.
Outside of that, honestly, I'm not sure who else comes back.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's going to be interesting. What are your predictions for the winter meetings?
Oh, you're asking me. I thought you were asking the fans to discuss that in our comments, if they ever did.
I mean, yes, fans, discuss in the comments what your predictions are, but this is not a live episode, and I can't talk directly to the fans. So, Skyler, I want to hear from you.
Craft a trade for Brenton Doyle.
I would be so sad. Like, it would crush me. I love Brenton Doyle very, very much. But at the same time, I recognize the importance of such a trade.
And maybe we get an inkling of like a notable free agent that they're going to sign. Not like they're not going to go big splash, but said we need veteran influence somewhere. Third base, first base, second base, all three of those maybe could use an addition. Especially first or second. Maybe we get news Thomas Harding drops a note of, hey, the Rockies are going to sign so and so. They're going to sign Josh Bell.
Or another thing I would like to see. Let's at least hear that the Rockies are talking to guys like Tatsuya Imai and other players being posted from Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Because I think, especially with Josh Byrnes coming in, that needs to be a shift that the Rockies make. Is, I get it, they have put a ton of resources into their Latin American program, but baseball is a worldwide sport.
Yeah, and honestly, the Rockies haven't really churned out much from that from the Latin American development. Tovar,
yeah, their vaunted Latin American player development program has really not turned out that much over the last
quite a while.
Gosh, decade. Like, if we've got another minute or so, I have a spreadsheet, and it's not
I think
pretty.
It's suffice to say, it just hasn't been as pretty as the Rockies think it would be.
No, it is not. Let's see. As of some point last season, I forget when I made this chart, from 2014 to present, the Rockies had only gotten 5.5 wins above replacement out of their Latin American player program.
Is that good?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's not good.
Yes.
But yeah, we will have a hopefully nice, juicy winter meetings recap for you next week, because that's going to do it here for us on this episode of Affected by Altitude. Skyler,
find me over on Twitter at Skyler Timmons, or on Blue Sky stimmons13.bsky.social, and write Wednesday Rock Piles for purplerow.com.
And you can find me at Blue Sky. That's going to be Evan Lang, 27.bsky.social. I would love to hear from you. Catch me on purplerow.com writing the Monday Rock Piles. And as we wrap up our Ranking the Rockies series, there's only about a week and a half left. Remember that you can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite podcasting platforms of choice: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. If it's got podcasts, you'll find us on it. You can also catch the video version of the show on youtube.com. Remember that you can catch Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite social media platforms of choice at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. Skyler, any parting words for us before we get on out of here?
Keep watching the skis.
I mean, skies.
And Metroid Prime exists.
That's going to do it here.
It's real.
It does. After many long years, it's real.
We've been waiting.
She has a motorcycle.
The last game came out in 2007. It's been waiting as long as the Rockies. Not since October have we played a Metroid Prime.
Oof. Oh, I just aged.
Federation Force doesn't exist. Nobody cares.
It doesn't. Yeah. It's the same as Triforce Heroes. It doesn't count. Alrighty. Well, that's going to do it here for us on Affected by Altitude. Skyler is going to go play Metroid Prime 4. So how about he hits us with it?
Farewell.
Justice for Crockemeyer, by the way. He did nothing wrong. Samus literally just marches into his house and murders him.
This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.